Hi gang, and welcome to a top 10 the best introduction commanders for the competitive EDH format. But before we start looking at the list, what actually make a commander a good introductional commander for beginners? Number 1, that they actually perform really well on a budget. Even though you have something of a budget list, you're still going to have a really high performing, high power level commander and deck. Criteria number 2 is that you can upgrade your list. You can basically take the collection that you have accumulated on a budget and move it towards a more typical standard cEDH deck. And also here that you're not accumulating cards that are specific for one specific commander only, that you're collecting budget staples that are being used universally among most of the cEDH decks that we have. Criteria number 3, that is actually quite simple deck to pilot, and it's not too complex. It's something a beginner could grab and easily understand. There are definitely decks in this EDH Commander competitive format that are actually quite difficult, and those are not going to appear on this top 10 list. Number 10, Selvala, Heart of the Wilds. Now you might be skeptic here. I think actually a lot of people would recommend Selvala as a little bit higher on the list. She's definitely somewhere around a budget. She's also quite easy to understand. However, there's a huge problem with Selvala that she's playing quite specific cards. You can't move from Selvala to other typical cEDH decks in the future. For example, here I have the Phyrexian Dreadnought, which is 1 mana 12/12, and okay, this is actually quite expensive card, but there are other variants to the Phyrexian Dreadnought with a really low CMC but a higher power to make rituals with Selvala and then win the game through these cool tricky ways. And you can definitely build Selvala on a budget, finding variants to these things. However, when you wanna move away from Selvala to something different, you can't take these cards to that new deck of yours. Still though, Selvala is a commander you could definitely put together on a budget and still have a highly functional, decent, competitive deck that is actually quite simple to understand and pilot and play. Number 9, the Gitrog monster. Now Gitrog monster should actually appear a little bit higher on the list as well, because this is actually a list that can function and perform really well on a budget. A lot of the cards you want to have in the Gitrog monster deck are actually quite cheap. Sure, there are a few cards that are really expensive that would upgrade the Froggy deck quite a lot, for example the Mono Black Chains and the Land Bazaar of Baghdad. However, you don't have to have these cards to have a functional and decent, well-performing competitive deck. And a lot of the cards you're having inside the Froggy Boss deck are cards you're gonna have in other green and black deck in the future as well. But there is actually a problem, and the reason why the Gitrog is such low on the number 9 on my list is because it's actually something of a complex rules deck. If you're accustomed to explaining rules to others, and you're good at explaining how triggers functions, and you're good at explaining to a judge and explaining what 4 horsemen is, and you're good at explaining how the end step triggers functions, and how all the different variants of rule debates and rule explanations the Froggy could actually bring, then this is a deck you could potentially pilot. If you're a former legacy or vintage, or maybe a really good modern player that's been playing Magic for quite a while, this is definitely a deck you could pick up and play quite easily. But if you're new to Magic, don't even touch this deck. Also, if you don't actually like sitting down and explaining rules to others, this is probably not the deck for you either. Number 8, Mono Red Godo Bandit Warlord with Helm of the Host. This is a really simple deck. All you need is 11 mana to win the game from the command zone. You cast Godo, you search out Helm of the Host, you pay 5 mana to equip the helm, and you win. That is super simple. Anyone could basically grab this deck, play it, and understand it immediately. It's also going to perform quite well on some form of budget. You basically want to have a lot of mana rocks, a lot of rituals, you're probably not going to be able to pick up mana crypts and mana vaults. Maybe you could find a really cheap budget mana vault, but you're not going to be able to put a grim monolith in there. But somewhere down the line, this is going to perform quite decently on a budget regardless anyways. It is far from the best deck in the world, but it's definitely a really easy deck that is somewhat okay-ish on a budget. And a lot of the mana rocks you want to put your money into assembling this deck are cards you can take to other decks in the future as well. Number 7, Ukima Food Chain. This is a great enter deck for you all, as it's really easy to understand. You read a few texts about how it operates, the few combo lines it has, and then you understand quite immediately how you're going to execute and play this deck. Also, all of the cards you're accumulating on a budget are cards you can take to future cEDH decks as well, and it is performing really well on a really low amount of money. Shaper Savant himself actually made a deck tech video on this channel for a $200 Ukima Food Chain deck that is, in my opinion, quite okay-ish. Number 6, Elsha of the Infinite. Now there are actually a few cards that are gonna cost a tiny bit inside the list. For example, Sensei's Divining Top. However, after that, most of the other cards are somewhat on a budget. And of course there are also budget alternatives to all the other cards. You have to have Sensei's Divining Top, but the rest have a lot of budget options. It is also a really simple deck to master and understand. You're basically looking at the 2-card combo, Sensei's Divining Top and Ethereum Sculptor, and there are also variants to Ethereum Sculptor, and with Elsha in play, you're going to draw your entire deck, and from there you could win the game in any form of way you wish. And most of the cards you're going to accumulate for this list are cards that are going to be moving with you to your future cEDH decks. Number 5, Urza Poly Titan, and this is also a deck we already have a deck tech video on a budget from the Tangelo. It's really simple to understand. You need your commander Urza in play, you cast your polymorph, you only have one creature inside the deck, that's Tidesprout Tyrant. All of these cards are somewhat on a budget, and there are also more variants to the polymorph. It's quite consistent and it performs quite well on a budget. Being mono blue is a great start for you. If you also decide to pump money into this deck in the future, you're going to notice that a lot of the cards you're grabbing are cards that are following you to future decks as well. Number 4, Kess, or Kess Consultation, or Turbo Kess, Underworld Breach Kess, Odd Nauseam Kess, Storm Kess, any form of Kess in general. All of them are actually quite simple to understand. You have Kess in play, you cast Demonic Consultation, you name Fastest Oracle, you have that in your hand, you cast Consultation from your graveyard, exile your entire deck, cast Oracle, and you win. It's a really simple deck to grab and understand and pilot and play with. It is definitely possible to build this deck on some form of a budget, and if you pump money into Kess, you're going to accumulate a lot of cards that are actually cEDH core staples that follow through to all decks inside the entire format. And now we are starting to actually touch some really strong commander decks. Kess is definitely up there among the top. Number 3, Kinnan. And guys, this guy could actually take the number 2 spot, but Kinnan is quite new, so I'm restraining myself and placing him on the number 3 spot, but he could definitely go up and grab the number 2 spot of being almost the second best introductional commander for the cEDH format. Kinnan is performing currently quite well, and you're accumulating a whole bunch of various simic that are all okay. There are a few cards that he's playing that are a little bit obscured, but most of the cards inside the Kinnan deck are quite cEDH awesome staples. But also, Kinnan is actually a great card to smash into most of the 99s in control mid-range commander decks. So starting your career with Kinnan is gonna give you an amazing, really simple, straightforward simic commander deck that is performing well on a budget, that can easily transform into any new deck in the future, where you take your Kinnan and smash it inside the 99 of your future deck. Alright, we're starting to touch the very top of number 1 and number 2, and the 2 remaining decks are actually really good decks that you could go to tournaments with. And let me actually explain a little bit about number 2. It's a cluster of decks, you could say. The farm decks. Let me actually explain this. Tymna the Weaver and the Bruce Thar were the original farm commanders, obviously living on a farm. Tymna the Weaver is making clothes and the Bruce are taking care of animals, so they are farmers. But then it expanded. Here you have Blue Farm. And then some amazing creations happen. Here you have Ikra in cEDH. What is going on? The life gain is helping you hard cast the nauseam, where you could potentially draw your entire deck. We actually have some strange gameplays of that. I never seen it in action, but I've actually heard about this farm version with Kram and Ikra. And here are some amazing budget options for you guys. You see, Tymna and Thrasius are actually quite expensive, and it's really hard to get into this format when you have to pay so much money for your 2 commanders. However, if you wanna run Ikra and Bruce and win with Ad Nauseam, that would actually be pretty interesting. You're playing white, red, black, and green. That's interesting, and basically going for Ad Nauseam, a farm deck. You could easily in the future upgrade this and replace one of these 2 commanders with either Tymna or maybe Kram or maybe Thrasius, and you're suddenly starting to accumulate a new deck. However, the entire farm deck you're accumulating with all the cards in it are usually on a budget. They are mostly rituals and some really weird cards actually, that are actually performing quite well. Even though this might look strange and a bit silly, this is actually somewhere dominating the metagame currently. Ad Nauseam, I would actually say, is one of the big metagame cards in the current state of the game. But we're actually talking more of a concept here. Okay, this is not farm, this is actually more of Golos Ad Nauseam. The reason you play Golos is that you have access to all 5 color identities and Boseyu, who shelters all, so you can make your Ad Nauseam uncounterable. That's really good, guys. Golos Ad Nauseam, and also of course Peer into the Abyss, is also something of the current metagame. This is one of the great decks to beat and be scared of. Not that hard to assemble on a budget, not that hard to master and understand. You basically cast Ad Nauseam or Peer into the Abyss, draw a whole bunch of cards, figure something out with a huge hand size, and from there you win the game. Now this is going to sound a little bit strange, but I actually think that number 2 here is a lot stronger in power level compared to my number 1 choice. However, the winner of number 1 is so simplex and so perfect, as you're accumulating cards that are gonna be amazing staples for all decks in general. So what is this master card commander I'm talking about? And it is actually a specific commander. Najeela the Blade Blossom. This beautiful lady used to be my number 1 favorite commander of all time. Then a new commander actually came, that is Cizay the Weatherlight Captain, but there's no way I'm recommending a Stacks meta rogue commander for the top number 1 spot. This, however, is a straight forward, super simplex turbo combo commander, Najeela the Blade Blossom. And she is really powerful and definitely a commander you could bring to tournaments. It's not because of the power level that I've stopped playing her, I just enjoy playing Cizay so much more than Najeela. However, this is still a dominating force to be reckoned with. Any beginner could simply just grab the deck, read Darevi Imperial Tacticianer, then read Najeela the Blade Blossom, and instantly understand exactly how this deck wins and what they need to do in order to win. Najeela also plays the really simple and straightforward combo Fast as Oracle and Demonic Consultation. The reason you play Demonic Consultation inside this deck is that most, or actually all, of your main combos with Najeela are one-card combos. You don't have a combo package at all, so you don't care that you're exiling 80% of your deck when you're casting Demonic Consultation if you're finding the combo piece Sword of Feast and Famine that is gonna win the game with Najeela the Blade Blossom. So it's a perfect tutor in instant speed for only 1 black mana for your Najeela Blade Lady, which means that you're also going to actually auto-include the Fastest Oracle as well. And there are even budget options for Najeela's one-card combos. Maybe you can't afford a Sword of Feast and Famine, maybe you can't afford a Darevi, maybe you can't find a Nature's Will. Nature's Will is actually really hard to find, it's not that expensive, it's just hard to find it. However, Cryptolic Rite, Bear Umbra are some functional budget options for you until you're able to spend more money into the format. Najeela also plays a huge variety of typical mainstream staples that all cEDH decks actually play. This is where Najeela is gonna differ from the number 2 spot of farm decks. Farm decks actually plays a whole bunch of really weird cards that are actually performing really well inside that specific deck, where Najeela are gonna play counter spells, Abrupt Decay. Okay, Abrupt Decay might be a little bit outside of normal budget, but you can definitely find other options instead of Abrupt Decay. But in the end, you're going to accumulate a whole bunch of typical mainstream staples that you can bring to any deck in the future. If you are a complete beginner to cEDH and you don't want to read a lot of articles about how you're going to win the game, you just want to grab something that is really simple, you want to have something that is performing really well on a budget, and you want to accumulate cards that you can take to any deck in the future, even competitive and casual, then I think Najeela is my number 1 recommended spot for you.
Toss a coin to your Twitcher. Oh, please share the video. Oh, please share the video. Toss a coin to your Twitcher, a friend of communities. Thank you, Patreons. The champion will prevail. Now pour him some mail. Toss a coin to your Twitcher. Oh, please share the video. Oh, please share the video. Toss a coin to your Twitcher, a friend of community.